Research methodology. Yeah, most of you say that is the easiest part of the thesis because you just have to decide what you are going to do, how you're going to gather information. But is it really the easiest side? Of course, everything in the thesis is easy. Everything in your dissertation is easy, provided that it is aligned. So today we are going to look at the structure of the methodology chapter, because it's taken as the simplest part of your thesis. But if it's not aligned, it can be the most difficult part of your thesis. So sit back, relax, enjoy your drink, whatever you want to take. As I walk you through, my name, of course, is Malcolm Shambana. You can catch me on 0977 488 442, or if you're outside the country, you can include the country code, which is +26 to that number, which becomes to 0977 488 442. Subscribe to my YouTube channel at Malcolm Shambana at Real Lectures. You'll find me there. Thank you. Enjoy watching this lecture and you get the more insight about the methodology chapter. Thank you. So our learning objective, though it's written a learning objective, we only have one learning objective, and that is at the end of the period, the learner must be able to explain the basic contents of the methodology chapter. Just a basic concept. So, the methodological structure, of course, begins with, just like any other chapter, it begins with an introduction to the chapter. And there are several ways in which this methodology chapter can be structured. Of course, generally, all sections with within your chapters, be it the introduction to your thesis, be it the literature review, usually, and of course, under normal circumstances, must have the introduction part. And the introduction will, of course, discuss the purpose of that chapter, be it the literature review, be it the introduction, even the background. The introduction has an introductory part of it. It will also discuss the research aims and objective. Why you put the research aims and objective in the methodology chapter is that to remind the readers and any other person who's really inquisitive about your thesis, about your research aims and objective. It always has to be remindful, reminding the reader that there is these objectives, which aims and objectives which have to be achieved. And you don't never ever forget that even in your methodology chapter, you need to consider your aims and objectives. I've seen, sorry about that, I've seen a dissertation and thesis where they totally, slightly, maybe totally or slightly ignore the aims and objectives. But the aims and objectives of your research have to be reflected in your research methodology. So that's why even in your introduction, you need to remind yourself about your research aims and objectives, and also remind the reader of your document about your research aims and objectives. You also need to discuss the structure of the chapter. That's a methodology chapter. You need to discuss the methodology chapter, how it has been structured. And this is very key. It's a guidance to yourself and also your readers. And one of the common structures, let me put it that way, there are several structures, of course, how you can structure your methodology. But in this case, our case, we are going to adopt the Saunders Research Onion. Saunders Research Onion. Like I said, every institution, every research center has their own way of doing things, and that's, of course, supreme to whatever we are lecturing here or whatever we're teaching here. But I'm just giving you a standard, really not really a standard, but a common practice which most researchers are currently using, which is the Saunders Research Onion. You can even come up with your own research method structure, but as provided you're able to justify why a particular items are in that line within your methodology structure. It's about justification. So the research onion, I adopted the agriculture extension South Asia diagram, which shows the research onion. You can literally relate it to the real onion in your kitchen, which has, of course, these circular patterns or oval patterns, of which it can come from a higher level to the lowest level of your research. So the higher level, in this case, we're talking about your research philosophy, which also trickles down to your research approach and trickles down to your methodological choices and also trickles down to your research strategy, trickles down to your time horizon, trickles down to your data collection. At times, you can even split. You can also go further into another onion, which is your data analysis. So, in your discussion within your research, you need to adopt a particular approach which discusses these very important levels of methodology. You need to discuss your approach within these circles. I summarized, of course, the research philosophy. This is which was done by the Agriculture Extension South Asia. The research philosophy, which in your first discussion, your first maybe paragraph, you need to discuss your research philosophy covering positivism, there is critical realism, there is interpretivism, there is postmodernism, and pragmatism. But in our discussion, we're going to focus on the key ones, which is positivism, interpretivism, and pragmatism, which I'm going to discuss in details within a short time. Wow. No, though I won't discuss like in real details, there are other videos within my YouTube channel which can cover those topics, which I've covered those topics rather, on what positivism is, interpretivism is, and pragmatism is. And further, the lower level, of course, the research approach, you are going to look at inductive, deductive, or abductive approach. The other level is the methodological choice, where you decide whether you're going to use qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method. This is your approach, even in your discussion of your thesis or dissertation methodology. You need to discuss which philosophy you are going to adopt, which research approach you are going to adopt, which methodological choice you are going to pick, which research strategy you are going to use. Is it experiment, survey, case study, ethnographic, narrative, grounded theory, action research, or several other tests? And you're also going to decide the time horizon. Though I've observed in most cases people leave out the time horizon, but it's critical. How are you going to do your research from this timeline? Are you going to do your research? Are you going to compare the research in we are now in 2024 with the research which was done in 2020? Is the opinion going to change? Is the test going to change? All that. You also need to decide the collection mode of your data depending on your research philosophy, depending also on your research approach, also depending on your methodological choice, also depending on your research strategy and timeline. All these are aligned and must be aligned. Besides having the research onion, I can split the Saunders research onion into, of course, it will no longer be an onion, into a table format. So if you look at the table, we have the patterns from high to the lowest level, which is data analysis. Sorry, it keep on rushing to the end, which is data analysis. From research philosophy to research approach, we have a research method, research strategy, time horizon, usually ignored, and also the data collection, where we can discuss the sampling and also the data analysis. So, from the philosophies, we have positivism, which looks at, of course, you acquiring knowledge from existing object through testing it, or interpretivism, where you are going to acquire knowledge from understanding of a human perspective or how the human perceives something, or pragmatism, which is a mixture of being positivism, taking a positivism approach and also taking an interpretivism approach. These videos are there. If you want the details, you can still go to my YouTube channel where I've explained the research philosophies. There is also an alignment in your research approach. If you decide to take positivism approach, definitely you're taking a deductive approach. If you decide to take interpretivism approach, you are taking an inductive approach. If you decide to take a pragmatism approach, then you are taking an abductive approach. Let me explain on these approaches. Deductive approach, you are trying to get information from a specific situation and generalize it. You're going to test a sample of people and generalize their behavior as if everyone behaves that way. That's being deductive. You're going to decide if Zambians drink too much alcohol. If you take a sample of 10 and you find that in that 10, 8 of Zambians take alcohol, then you are going to generalize that 8% of Zambians take alcohol from the sample. But inductive is rather vice versa. You are going to get an opinion, then try to, because remember, deductive, we are trying to move from specific to general. But inductive, you are trying to get an opinion, then try to be specific about that opinion. So the deductive person will pick it from there and try to generalize that opinion. Then abductive is a mixture of these two. You might be falling between deduction and induction. There is a specific lesson on being deductive and deductive within my YouTube channel. Please try to check on that one, then you get the specification. Otherwise, let me not confuse you. I'll stick to our subject today, which is the Saunders Research Onion. So, the Saunders Research Onion, there is the part of now the research method. You are going to decide whether you are quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative is related to, of course, aligned with positivism or deductiveness, which is your research approach, and qualitative is aligned with interpretivism or inductiveness. As usual, pragmatism is a mixture of those two, where you fall between those two approaches. In your research, you are going to use a qualitative method or quantitative, or also partly qualitative. Then you are in a mixed method. But just make sure that if your research philosophy is positivism, you are going to use a deductive approach. You are going to use a qualitative approach. Your research strategy is going to be either you are going to experiment or use descriptive or correlation in a case of your research philosophy. There's research philosophy which is aligned with positivism is doing an experiment. There's the research strategy which is aligned with research approach, of course, is deductive. The research strategy which is aligned with research method is, of course, quantitative. It's the same case. The research method or research strategy which is aligned with research philosophy, interpretivism, is you're going to use ethnographic or case study or grounded theory. Same case, your research strategy supposed to be aligned with your research approach, which is inductive, also aligned with your research method, which is qualitative. Everything has to be aligned. Pragmatism, of course, is a mixture of these approaches. Same case as time horizon, you are going to use the time horizon cross section is, of course, within the same period, a short period of time. And the longitudinal is when covering maybe over a period of maybe 5 years to 10 years. And usually such researchers taking these time horizons are aligned with the research strategy. They are also aligned with the research methods. They are also aligned with the research approach. They are also aligned with the research philosophy. Everything is aligned. Don't throw in things in the research methodology just because it's a method. No, it has to be aligned with the philosophy. It has to be aligned with the research approach. It has to be aligned with the research method, also has to be aligned with the research strategy, and also, of course, the time zone. Why we use a longitudinal time zone which covers a longer period in the interpretivism philosophy of research is because ideas. Interpretivism is related to, aligned with subjectivism. People are subjective, and ideal subjectivism changes with time. The idea you have, the opinion you have today may change with time. So longitudinal test in terms of time horizon is appropriate for interpretivism and in an inductive research approach, and also in qualitative research methods. Research strategy, of course, your sampling strategy, usually data collection. Here we are discussing your sampling strategy when we talk of data collection. Definitely something to do with positivism, with a research approach which is deductive, with a research method which is quantitative, with a research strategy which makes experimental, descriptive, or correlation. Definitely, your sample has to be statistical. You have to use probability sampling. It has to be aligned with your philosophy. Your sampling has to be aligned with the appropriate philosophy. If your philosophy is positivism, your research approach is deductive, your research design is quantitative, your research strategy is an experiment, descriptive, correlation, your sampling is supposed to be mathematical or statistical. Compared to if you take a philosophy of interpretivism, your sampling has to be non-probabilistic. There is no predefined procedure on how you are going to sample. You are going to sample on what's appropriate or who can give you the right information, because you are in qualitative research mode and you are using an inductive research approach. Of course, you are using longitudinal. I explained all that. Of course, pragmatism is a mixture of those strategies. Data analysis. If your philosophy is positivism, your research approach is deductive, your research method is quantitative, your research strategy, you're going to do experiment, correlation, descriptive, you are going to use a time zone which is cross-sectional, a short period of time, of course. Your data sampling is statistical. Of course, you are going to use these statistical formulas, which are the t-square, ANOVA, chi-square, and so on. These have been discussed in other videos in details. Of course, they have to be aligned with your approach, which is your research method, which is quantitative. Same case as if you are in an interpretivism philosophy, your data analysis is supposed to follow content analysis, thematic analysis, grounded analysis. Everything has to be aligned. That's the whole idea about your research method. Don't mix up things. They can be mixed up if you have taken a good approach of pragmatism and you are mixing the methods, and they have to be explained and justified why they are mixed up. But you can't not adopt an approach which is interpretivism, then you use quantitative method or cross section or probability sampling, a statistical method. Meanwhile, your philosophy is interpretivism. I think I've discussed enough, though it may be confusing, but the table will explain a lot more if you analyze it properly. It will explain more. If you have any questions, you can drop me a question within my YouTube channel. You can also like my YouTube channel for further notification of what's coming. You can also like this video so that your colleagues can see what you have been watching and if it's sensible. Enjoy your day, your study, and all the best in your research. Thank you for watching and listening to this video.